Welcome to today's Explainer, everyone. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here today because we're about to embark on a seriously fascinating journey. We are going to unpack the architectural history of New York City, tracing its pretty unbelievable transformation from a quiet, forested island into, well, the most iconic, towering skyline on Earth. We're going to look at exactly how a city managed to reach the sky, using the buildings themselves to read the story of the people who built it.
Just picture this contrast for a second. If you were standing right in the middle of Manhattan in the year 1600, you wouldn't be looking at skyscrapers. No neon lights, no Times Square. It was just forests, rivers, and a small Native American settlement. Literally a different world. Now flash forward and compare that to today's concrete jungle. These massive glass giants and towering Art Deco masterpieces everywhere you look. This extreme, wild transformation proves a really powerful concept. New York's architecture isn't just a random collection of buildings. It's a physical manifestation of human ambition, of immigration, money, disaster, and just relentless innovation.
Okay, let's dive right into Section 1, the foundations of New York.
So, to understand how this all started, we actually have to go back to a time when New York wasn't even called New York. Our story kicks off in the early 1600s with New Amsterdam, which was a bustling Dutch trading colony right down at the southern tip of Manhattan. By the mid-1600s, the architecture was, well, it was incredibly simple and practical. Builders were throwing up these wooden houses with steep Dutch roofs, lining these muddy little streets right near the waterfront. And these were absolutely not built to impress anyone. Life was entirely about commerce, and these structures were just designed to survive the elements. But all of this completely shifted in 1664. That's when the British took control, renamed the settlement New York, and kicked off a brand new architectural era. But as the city grew through the 18th and early 19th centuries, it hit a massive, massive crisis. All those practical wooden buildings, yeah, they turned out to be a huge liability. Fires were frequently sweeping through the city, utterly wiping out entire neighborhoods. So architecture had to adapt, and fast. The solution was a major shift toward elegance, and, more importantly, durability. Builders started turning heavily to brick and stone, drawing a lot of inspiration from European styles to create these gorgeous, sturdy churches, government buildings, and townhouses.
Let's move to Section 2 and see how this builds. The 1811 street grid.
Now we need to talk about a planning choice that quite literally shaped the city's future. In 1811, city planners introduced something totally revolutionary, the Manhattan grid. You know it. It's that famous system of straight streets and intersecting avenues that still dictates exactly how the city flows today. I really want you to imagine, just for a second, being a planner laying down this straightforward geometric groundwork over a wild island. It seems like a pretty simple layout, right? But it ended up shaping New York's architectural future more than anyone back then could have possibly imagined.
The benefits of this grid were immediate and honestly explosive. First, it made development significantly easier. Second, it made construction much faster. And third, it allowed for an incredibly organized expansion of the city. Thanks to this one very straightforward planning decision, New York began expanding at an absolutely extraordinary pace, perfectly setting the stage for a massive influx of new residents.
Which brings us to Section 3, the Brownstone era.
By the mid-1800s, the population of New York was absolutely booming. Millions of immigrants were arriving on the city's shores looking for opportunity, and they urgently, desperately needed places to live. The solution to this massive housing demand was the iconic brownstone. These elegant row houses, built from that signature reddish-brown sandstone, quickly lined entire streets across Manhattan and Brooklyn. And for a lot of families, owning one of these wasn't just about having a roof over their heads anymore, it became the ultimate symbol of success and modern urban life. At the exact same time, architects started drawing inspiration from these beautiful Gothic Revival, Italianate, and Victorian styles. So the city wasn't just growing in numbers anymore, it was gaining a true, distinct, and beautiful identity. Now what's really interesting is what happens next in Section 4, the race to the sky. Toward the end of the 19th century, New York completely shifts dimensions. We transition from building outward to building upward. So how did they pull this off? Well, it required a recipe for the skyscraper, driven by a perfect storm of technology and economics. Step 1. Steel frame construction. This finally made taller buildings structurally possible without collapsing under their own weight. Step 2. Elevators. These meant people could practically access dozens of floors above the ground. And fun fact here, it was actually Elisha Otis's invention of the elevator safety brake that made people trust these crazy contraptions enough to actually ride them. And finally, Step 3. Land in Manhattan became so astronomically valuable that building outward was just no longer an option. Extreme economic pressure quite literally forced the city to grow upward into the clouds. The age of the skyscraper had officially arrived.
Suddenly, the New York skyline transformed into a stage. This wasn't just your standard building boom. It was an aggressive, totally unprecedented competition unlike anything the world had ever witnessed before. Businesses demanded taller buildings to show off their power. Developers craved bigger landmarks. Architects were desperate to break world records. The skyline just began rising higher and higher every single year. The city was no longer just expanding to fit people. It was reaching for the clouds in a really fierce race for dominance.
That brings us right to Section 5, the Art Deco Age.
This fierce competition totally culminated in the 1920s and 30s, a true golden era for the city, defined by bold geometric shapes and this unyielding optimism about the future. At the absolute peak of this architectural showdown, you have the legendary Chrysler Building, famous for its dazzling sunburst stainless steel crown. And right across town, its great rival, the Empire State Building. What's truly incredible here is that the Empire State Building was completed right in the middle of the Great Depression. It stood as this towering symbol of extreme determination. You see, these structures weren't just office buildings. They were these incredibly bold statements proving to the world that New York believed absolutely anything was possible. They defined the city's identity globally for decades.
So, the crucial point to take into Section 6 is the modern skyline.
You see, architecture never stays static, especially not in New York. After World War II, the highly decorative styles of Art Deco gave way to sleek modernism. Glass, steel, and clean lines became the new global standard. Architects started experimenting with brand new materials and crazy new ideas. And by the time we hit the late 20th and early 21st centuries, New York had evolved into a global showcase. Gritty industrial districts were totally transformed into thriving, trendy neighborhoods, and old, forgotten warehouses were reimagined as ultra-luxury apartments.
Which brings us to a really beautiful realization about modern New York. To quote a great observation, its future didn't require erasing its past. Instead, New York embraced both. Think about it. Today, you can walk down a street and see a futuristic all-glass tower standing shoulder to shoulder with a historic 19th century landmark. The city actually learned how to seamlessly blend its deep historic preservation with cutting-edge futuristic architecture.
Finally, let's wrap this up with Section 7, the conclusion.
I want you to just take a moment and imagine looking out at the New York skyline today, armed with everything we've just uncovered in this explainer. When you look at that skyline now, you aren't just seeing buildings. You are seeing centuries of dreams stacked one on top of another. You're seeing the legacy of early Dutch settlers building practical wooden homes, the immense wave of immigrants making their lives in elegant brownstones, and the fierce, relentless ambition of architects competing in steel, stone, and glass. It is a skyline born of ambition, born of crisis, and shaped by breathtaking technological triumph. And this brilliantly illustrates the core message of our entire journey today. Every building is a chapter. New York is an extraordinary city where history, ambition, and sheer human imagination are written directly into the architecture itself.
But here's the best part. The story isn't over. It's still being written every single day, which leaves us with one incredibly exciting question to ponder. What will the next chapter look like? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep looking up, and I'll catch you next time.